When did you have the most difficult time staying professional? My former boss called for a staff meeting because someone drew a massive peen in a dusty window in the back of the office. I was working at an internet provider when someone came in to pay his bill. Now, I've seen a lot of ridiculous last names and I've kept a straight face, but this time I couldn't help it. His last name was Usman. I broke up laughing in front of him and apologized profusely. He was pretty chill about it and was like, "It got me a lot of action in high school." For the record, he pronounced it AHHS men. I had a student miss 68 days of my class in a 90-day semester. The reason she missed was because my class was too early in the morning. The school calls the house every day a kid is absent in any class and sends letters. Grades are available online at any time, and letters are sent home saying when kids are in danger of failing. The child, shockingly, did not pass my class. She ended up with about a 40 passing grade as a 70. The mom called me after final saying that I should pass the kid because she was pretty close to passing and that's pretty damn good for missing that many days. She said that if she had come every day she absolutely would have passed. So I needed to pass her because mom wanted her to graduate on time. She would not stop arguing with me, although there was no way in hell I was going to pass the kid. I've never had to restrain myself so much from cursing at someone or just flat out hanging the phone up on her. When a parent of one of my students said TikTok, "You don't have forever," referring to me having children, a week after I had a miscarriage. I used to work for 111 the UK non-emergency medical line working nights. A woman rang at about 2 AM, crying, saying, "I don't know what I'm doing. Please help me, I don't know what I'm doing." Initially I thought she was one of the many bastards who called in, but as I spoke to her I realized that she was horribly, deeply depressed. She'd been unable to sleep, thoughts churning over and over, so had gone for a drive, got lost, and was on the side of the road bawling her eyes out to a stranger. NHS mental health coverage is patchy at best, so we got a lot of calls from people who felt they had nowhere else to turn, particularly in the lonely hours of the night. I always responded with compassion, but I connected more deeply with this woman as she talked. I realized she was basically me 10 years before. She'd been diagnosed with bipolar recently, at the same age I was, and was struggling to manage a responsible job and looking after family, the position I had been in at the same point in my life. There were questions I had to ask, and I was as sensitive as I could be with a blunt "Do you currently have a plan to end your own life?" She said yes, and told me about it, and that meant I had to call her an ambulance. Normally at this point I would hang up, carry on with my shift, but it was pretty quiet, so I told her I'd stay on the line with her for a bit. She continued talking about the crisis she'd come to, and it was chiming again and again with my own experiences. At one point she said something like, "You seem to know a lot about this," and without really thinking I said something flip like "Takes one to know one." She asked me if I had bipolar too, and I said yes, and although I shouldn't really have told her that, it seemed to really help. We continued to talk, and bad as she felt, at least she knew that there was someone who had been through much the same as her, and that, although my life was far from ideal, I was at least alive, loved, and earning my own money. She really thought that her diagnosis meant she was doomed to a sad half-life, scraping by on benefits, which she dreaded because she was progressing well in her career in healthcare. The ambulance arrived, this was up north somewhere, so I heard the paramedic approach the car and say, "Are you there, Sarah, my duck?" And she thanked me and hung up the phone. As I say, strictly I should not have brought any of my personal life into the call, but I don't regret it in this case. I still think about her. I used to work at a university, and one day we had a staff Christmas party. The president acts all friendly and even rolls up his sleeves to serve ice cream to the peons. Anyways, he was up on stage giving an inspirational end of the year speech when he rips a massive fart. There was dead silence, but I couldn't handle it and just burst out laughing. Everybody else followed suit, and for a good 2 minutes the entire room was dying from laughter. I felt really bad because he recently had some king of stomach surgery and probably couldn't control it, but goddamn was it hilarious. I would say the coworker who took a fresh dump and placed it in the office microwave fits the criteria. Oh geez. A guy had an interview with my company and my coworkers and I were looking at his resume beforehand. We noticed that there were several spelling errors, including spelling project as project. So the guy comes in and I'm, along with a coworker, interviewing him, giving technical questions and whatnot. He wasn't doing that well. The guy's back is to the rest of my office and the wall is glass, so see-through. Obviously, in the middle of the interview, a coworker on the outside looks at me and slowly raises a piece of paper from his desk, facing it towards me. On it is a single word in capital letters, "Project." I had to excuse myself to get a drink of water when in reality I needed to catch my breath to prevent myself from cracking up. Now it's whatever, but when I was just starting out in costuming, it was mostly the ridiculousness of some of the fittings I had to do. You try not to, but sometimes you have to giggle when you're fitting some guy and talking very seriously about how much room he needs added to the crotch of his Continental Army issue knee breeches because he has a big peen. Or have to try with all your might to not snap at a skinny ass Broadway actor who's whining when you put her actual measurement down and not some weird vanity size she thinks she is. I'm a translator and recently was asked to translate a magazine article about the history of smutty literature, talking about stuff like the School of Venus. This particular client speaks English quite well and actively reviews my translations, so I'll usually send her the file and then she'll send it back with comments or clarifications or suggestions for words she'd prefer that I use. That's how I ended up in a professional discussion about which terms to use to describe whipping in a BDSM context. Whenever I work on a feature that gets cancelled before anybody even sees it. Had a guy threatening to put me on blast on the Facebook groups I actively sell/buy/trade pins on. He claims he ordered a pin from me months prior and never received it. Well, I go through all my PayPal transactions and there's not one that matches his name, nor any with money coming in that I didn't ship out. Finally find a transaction for him. And the reason he never got anything is because he ordered a pin and then filed a claim for a refund within the next 3 days. Showed him this and he tries to say he never got a refund, even though it shows clear as day the money in/out in my account lines up. Finally made him log on to his PayPal and screenshot the transaction info. And wouldn't you know it, it says transaction cancelled, money refunded. Needless to say I was really struggling not flipping out, as most of my income comes from this hobby, and your reputation means everything. Working my first job as a server at a horrible Tex-Mex chain that has since closed, I only lasted 2 months. One night in particular I had this family of 6 and the mother was just a horrible shrew of a woman, demanding constant chips and tortillas, more queso, more salsa even though they still had plenty on the table. Got crappy with me because I put ice in her husband's Coke and insisted they had specified no ice. They hadn't. I went in the back and cried. The other servers ran my food and one of them told the customer that I was new and trying my best so maybe give me a break. The woman said some lame excuse about her daughter wanting to be a server, so she just wants her to see how to do the job right. I finished out the table, got a crappy tip, but I did make $100 from a nearby table that had watched the whole crap show, so that was nice. I found out my fiance had been cheating on me about an hour into a 12-hour overnight hotel desk shift. I still want my Oscar for no customers seeing the inner turmoil of my life ripping itself apart through the veneer of customer service polish. A woman I worked with had some serious mental problems and was heavily medicated. Obviously no one at work knew this because, while she was always kinda catty and bishy, she never did anything strange. One morning I'm pulling in as she is walking in, and she stops to talk to me. She starts asking about my wife, and then tells me how sexy she is. I was like, thanks, and she walked into the building. From there she walks into the office of a very flamboyantly gay employee, and proceeds to hit on him, like it's last call at the bar. He turns her down, so she sits in one of the chairs in his office, and proceeds to light up a cigarette. She doesn't smoke. He freaks out, because he is worried she is high or something, and doesn't want her to lose her job, so he escorts her back to her office. She proceeds to do a ton of other weird crap till one of the women in the office calls her husband. He explains the situation, and that she must be off her meds rushes over and picks her up. Poor woman ends up in an institution and leaves some very colorful messages on the answering machine for us. Apparently she also banged a couple of dudes at the institution and decided that she was going to ditch her husband and 2 kids for a fellow mental patient. Very sad, but also a very weird situation for those of us who had to deal with it. Not my current job, but when I was in college I worked as a garbage man for 3 summers straight. I have many stupid, sad, funny stories, and I also have one that would fit right here. During my first summer, there was a trash bin that we couldn't move for some reason. Like, even us 3 dudes in our late teens/early 20s couldn't move that thing. So, we followed the protocol and just ignore it. It's not our responsibility to collect it if it's unmovable. After a few days, the man who the trash belonged to waited for us and asked us why we didn't collect it. We took the time to explain the situation, and he very calmly told us that he poured some concrete into his trash because people kept knocking it down. I'm not even joking. Half of his trash was filled with concrete. Flabbergasted, we basically told him that he had no right to do that. The trash belonged to the city. But when we told him that, he got angry and started yelling at us, saying that our attitude was unacceptable and he called us lowlifes and pieces of crap. He then proceeded to take the bags out of his trash, threw them on the floor, and told us to pick it up. As you can imagine, there was nothing we wanted more at this moment than to punch him in his stupid face and just leave him amongst his bags of trash. But we would have been in big trouble had we done that, so we obviously didn't. And since it's against the rules to leave trash on the ground, we picked it up very carefully as he watched us with his smug smile and stayed professional. When we finished and went back on the truck, he told us to frick off. We replied, "Have a nice day, sir," and that was it. That was 8 years ago, and I'm still mad about it. I teach English as a foreign language at a kindergarten in Japan. My students are 3 years old, so there's a lot of me and other teachers having to pull the mad face and telling students not to do something, and then laughing about it later on in the day. The romantic dramas that 3-year-olds are involved in is hilarious and would rival any romance novel. But one of them topped the cake, and I had to fake a little coughing fit to distract from it. I've assigned the students to draw and color their favorite fruits, meaning they understand what fruit is, which fruit they like, and then the physical dexterity and motor skills to draw and color said fruit. Color choices are ignored because, well, kids like weird color combinations. All of the students are drawing and coloring their little bananas, and strawberries, and watermelons, and everything else they know and like. But one student isn't. Instead he drew him holding my hand with lots of smiles because, as I asked about it, I was his favorite teacher and he loved me. It was adorable and one of the sweetest things ever. Unfortunately it also wasn't the assignment, so I had to take it away and give him a new sheet of paper and go over the assignment with him. But I kept the picture because, well, it was the sweetest thing ever. And then he started chewing on my leg every time he saw me, so it's gotten a little awkward as I'm not exactly sure what being little Hannibal Jr's favorite teacher entails. But I'm betting there's fava beans and an ice Chianti in my future. I work for a performance venue that has a lot of guest artists come in, some of them being very well known. No matter who it is, we're expected to be absolutely professional around them. It's a point of pride for me that I'm able to stay collected in front of some pretty famous people, but it's real hard sometimes. The one that stands out most is a year ago when we had an actress visiting who I was a huge fan of. Not exactly a celebrity, but someone anyone who has watched a decent amount of CCTV would recognize. I was asked to basically be her assistant for the day. I had to fight the whole time to keep from completely fangirling out on her. She was also really sweet and awesome and basically just hung out with me when she wasn't rehearsing. When she left, she gave me a big hug and a card thanking me for taking such good care of her. No joke. I considered having it framed. I definitely still have it somewhere. When you have a meeting, that could have been an email. When a guy for whom I was coordinating breakdown assistance refused to give me any location other than the town he was in, and that he was opposite Peter the Rapist's house, I had to call the tow truck operators and tell them that the guy was opposite Peter the Rapist's house. The best part? They knew exactly where I meant. Never change. Ireland. When a parent told me that the only reason I was a special education teacher was because I wasn't good enough to teach normal kids. Even thinking about it now gets me heated. The one time really lost my cool and yelled at my boss. We had been working on a project that was going to change a lot about how we were going to be interacting with customers. The project was something I was really passionate about. Spent a lot of time working on both at work and at home in my spare time. My boss and I had a disagreement about an aspect of the program we were building. I was working on a team of about 10 people and we all got together and made a plan supporting why we wanted a certain feature. Created mock-ups. Solid reasoning for why the feature would be. The only person against this feature was the big boss and had provided no reasoning for his decision. Not having this feature would create tons of headaches for everyone involved. We have a final meeting about the project. I present my case for having the feature added calmly and respectfully. At the end of the meeting my boss just looks me dead in the eye and says, "So, what you are saying is that I'm a freaking moron then? By saying I'm wrong about this you are saying that I have no freaking clue what I'm doing, right?" I was blown away. I had been warned before not to disagree with him on anything because he takes it way too personally, but I had really been professional in presenting the idea. Had solid backup from the entire team. But because I presented the idea I was targeted. I lost my temper at that time. Not really yelling or anything but just questioning what he meant in a not so professional manner. Accused him not being able to accept ideas that were not his own. This was not a good idea. From that day forward the boss targeted me for any little infraction. I was once pulled into a meeting because I was crossing my arms in front of my chest during a different meeting. According to him, it was a defensive position showing I was not interested in the meeting. I was cold, damn it. Another time, I left for the day because I was sick. I came back a few days later to find that he talked to all of my co-workers telling them #0WN wasn't sick. He was just being a bitch. It's okay. Admit it to me. You know he wasn't sick and was just skipping out of work. I was let go 6 months after the incident. I admit that I did not handle the situation correctly. I lost my temper and said things I should not have said in that meeting. But for an employee who had been with the company for a decent amount of time, whose last several reviews all stated, "Keep doing what you're doing," and #0WN is possibly the most valuable member of the team. To have one incident destroy my career was heartbreaking. This was close to 10 years ago but it still impacts on how I interact with people at work. A valuable life lesson for sure. A client forgot their password. I was on the phone with them trying to retrieve it. I finally did. It was Poopia69. I froze. There was no way I could say that to a client with a straight face. So I was like, "I'm gonna spell it. You ready? It's P-O-O. Wait, I just remembered what my password was." It was my first day as a cashier and the customer's bottle of cold brew Starbucks coffee wouldn't scan because the barcode ran along the ridges. Customer asked, "Does that mean it's free?" Totally cracked me up and I about lost it. Now that I've been on the job a while, I realize that is a cliched joke, but my family is American Gothic serious, so I didn't grow up with any humor in my household. I once had a piano student whose mother made him take music lessons. After several weeks it became apparent to me that the boy's heart wasn't in it, and that allowing his mother to force him to continue was not in his best interest. When I explained this, his mother insisted that I continue teaching him no matter what and that if I didn't she'd spread the word that I had failed him as a student. At that point, I told her to do whatever she felt she had to because forcing a student to study music against his wishes would do harm long term, and that I wouldn't be party to it. I'm an electrician, and as you think, we usually go to private apartment to do some maintenance and crap. There's a lot of things that get to my mind, but the most interesting are some of them. I rang the bell to the place I was supposed to work, and a gorgeous Indian girl, aged 25-30, opened the door with nothing except some lingerie, and she tried to seduce me the whole time I was there. And as you think it's pretty hard to keep your concentration when there's boobs just a centimeters of your face. This time I couldn't keep it professional because the place I were was literally a big pile of garbage and filth. I opened a socket and it was the biggest bug nest I ever seen. Like billions of cockroaches and crap crawling from the socket to the walls. I then called my boss and basically said frick this, I'm out. And last but not least, I was working in a bank. But not a casual little neighborhood bank. It was one of the biggest private bank in Geneva, big deal, and I was supposed to be monitored by a guard at any time. But when I was working on the security system of the vault he left me, so I was alone in the vault, without any security, cause I was putting a new one. With millions in diamond/gold/cash around me, the idea of getting a handful of diamonds and some gold then run away to somewhere without extradition was really hard to fight. My manager was my ex's sister. When I left my ex who was an abusive alcoholic and met someone new, she couldn't take it. Her and her boss, who I think she's having an affair with, would sign onto my computer prior to me coming into work and read my emails and log into my Facebook. My password was saved to my comp and use what they found against me. Once I was 30 minutes late because the babysitter for my daughter cancelled last second and I had to find someone else, and when I came in, I was told it was a bullcrap excuse and my punishment was to put my cell phone in the car and only look at it on break. I had to bite my tongue until I found a new job and gave them only 1 week's notice through email. Once I left, she messages my mother to tell her I was pregnant, which she found out through looking through my Facebook messages, which I didn't want anyone to know about, since I have horrible pregnancies, and was being cautious, and wasn't sure if I was keeping the baby. My mother told her, which is a lie, that she has had someone following her watching her cheat on her husband, and if she wants to keep trying to hurt me, she'll call her husband. I had to drive all the way from Tipperary just to be told you sent my jeans back. Well yes, you received a text and an email a month ago to tell you your €56 jeans were in store and would be held for a maximum of 2 weeks. She was a right demanding and demeaning old twat as well. However, this is retail, so all she got was a strained smile and I'm so sorry for the inconvenience, etc. etc. Also, she could have had this crap delivered to her home address for free. Also the drive from Tip to Limerick is like 45 minutes. Calm down. When I'm treated like a secretary by older male colleagues because I'm a young woman, I'm in a management position. Google that yourself, Steve. I have real work to do. I'm a teacher at a middle school. A very well-known child star attended our school, and I had to restrain myself from fangirling all over him every time I passed him. One time I yelled at him for running in the hallway, so that was pretty cool. Edit, changed onto 1. I used to work for a company that scheduled personal support workers to go see seniors in their home. I was taking over the desk from somebody else who did a similar job, but with slight differences. I picked up the phone and a nice elderly gentleman calmly stated that he would like to order an escort. The only escort I had ever heard of at the time was of the nice pretty ladies that you can take out for a good time. I had a hard time believing that this gentleman thought that our company provided this kind of service. I didn't quite know what to say, but I remained professional and I requested a bit more detail just to be sure I understood what he was asking for. Turns out our company also provided personal support workers to take the elderly to and from medical appointments. Because my desk/region I coordinated didn't provide this kind of service, I was unaware that our company as a whole provided this kind of service. Needless to say, I'm glad I kept my composure. Covering the Le Mans 24-hour motorcycle race in 1985. Everyone with a camera covers the famous Le Mans start, but I decided I'd put myself by the hairpin and cover the pack herring in on the first lap, because someone would crash there. It's a very slow bottom gear bend. I set up the camera, prefocused, on a tripod, set the motor wind to fast and just pressed the tit. Sure enough, I got a lovely sequence of 2 or 3 guys sliding gracefully off. A few minutes later there was a howl, and one of the works Corsa Kiss, piloted by one Dominique Latourden, hurtled down to the hairpin, didn't even attempt to go round it, and shot straight into the runoff area. That led to a left, right, and then the circuit continued for the full car circuit. For bikes they used the short Bugatti circuit. There was a frozen moment and everyone realized there was no way, at that speed, that he'd have negotiated the runoff. I grabbed the camera, still on its tripod, and ran. He hadn't. He'd tried to get round the tight left equals right GHT, but the bike had gone into the Armco, and he'd flown on and into a cement wall. It was very messy, and I just kept shooting pics. I looked at the bike. One of the front brake calipers had come of its quick release, and was just hanging on the end of the brake hose. So when he'd squeeze the brakes to slow from speed to maybe 25-30 miles per hour, he'd had no brakes. I took pics of that, as well. When I got back to base, after the race, I threw the film, color transparency. Remember, no digi stuff back then, at the processors. I reviewed the pictures, and simply decided I didn't want anyone, ever, to see them published. The Le Mans press office used to, maybe still does, ask journalists and photographers to send them examples of their coverage, for their own records, and also to sort out the freeloaders. I just packed off the pictures, the originals, and sent them off with a covering letter. Latorden left a widow and 2 small kids, I think. Someone told me that I could have sold the pictures worldwide for a fortune, as I really was the only journalist there. If it happened today, I would. But I was a rookie back then, and I actually didn't stay professional at all. Won't make that mistake again, maybe. When I was teaching a 4th grade class in England one year, the headmaster told me that there was a teacher returning from mat leave and they would be team teaching with me. Alright, that's fine. Turns out that meant that I would only be teaching half the week, but I would still need to mark everything, including the stuff I didn't teach. Not cool, but whatever. Soon, I was locked out of meetings with parents. I wasn't considered a classroom teacher anymore, and I wasn't allowed access to my classroom on the days when I was in the school but didn't teach. I knew they were trying to push me out. I almost lost it one day when a parent had asked to have a meeting with me, and when I went to the meeting, I was told by the head teacher that my team teacher was attending instead, and they didn't need me. I quit 2 days later. I was so mad. I used to do technical support / sales for the offshore industry. I was once on the ship for 10 days, and traveled back to land with a bunch of sailors who were offshore from anywhere from 30-60 days. Wow, you have not partied until you've partied with sex-starved Eastern European seamen. I still remember we were walking around and found this secret strip club in an abandoned warehouse. Or that time my Serbian friend got a little too friendly with Mrs. Claus and we got chased away by the mob. Also, a bunch of the sailors got mad and pretended they were the Who and trashed their hotel rooms and got fired for it. Repost of a previous comment of mine. I attended a round of interviews right before graduating college. The company flew me and 2 of my classmates out. Small field, and my school is well known for it. They put us each in different rooms and we interviewed with several departmental heads from the company. The interviews were pretty standard. I could tell they were trying to see who would fit best into their company culture, as well as perform the job well. We were all qualified, so it came down to personality. Everything was standard until the 3rd manager that interviewed me. He came in, shook my hand, and sat down. Average height, maybe 220 lbs. He had thick, black, oily, curly hair cropped neatly on top of his head. He had an odd posture, kind of holding his head back, the way anyone would do when trying to give themselves a second chin, pushing his jaw down into his neck a bit. I remember every detail about this guy because of the interview. He began talking to me a bit, but then it happened. PLBBBBBBBBLT. In the middle of his sentence he straight up just made a fart noise by sticking his tongue out of his mouth, closing his lips and blowing. It was quick, but it caught me completely off guard. He went right back into what he was saying. He only did it once, before finishing what he was saying, and I started to answer. However, as soon as he stopped talking and start listening I began to get assaulted by loud, longer, face like a pufferfish, fart noises. It was clear he was trying to suppress it, but that it was very hard. Crap, this guy has Tourette's. Either he has Tourette's, or he is freaking with me on a major level. Whenever he spoke it was less often, less intense. But whenever I was talking I could tell he was trying to listen intently, but he couldn't contain himself nearly as well. The interview went on, and eventually finished. I was stone-faced, made it through 2 more rounds and they took us for lunch. He continued to do it occasionally there, with the rest of his coworkers. None of them reacted, so I felt affirmed that it must be Tourette's. After a long day they took me and my classmates back to the airport. As soon as we got through security we all completely broke down. We had all come to the same conclusion. But to this day I really don't know if it was some kind of interview tactic or not. I'll never know.